All right. Hello. I want to welcome everyone today. My name is Sarah Carell, founder of The Power of Our Story, Coffee and Conversation. And today we are celebrating our Independence Day a little early, but we are coming together in appreciation for the freedoms and strengths that we have. We are doing this by having our veterans and first responders storytelling jam session. What the power of our story is all about is connection. We want to create a place of safety for our protectors, a place for them to process their journey, a place for them to connect with each other, to be able to do transition with. It's a place where people know that others get it. And today I'm so excited to have Dr. Shauna Springer, otherwise known as Doc Springer, on. She is the best-selling author of Warrior, How to Support Those Who Protect Us. And then we also have Jennifer Tracy. She is the best-selling author of From the Deepest Darkness to the Light of Hope. And they're going to be talking tonight about helping active duty military veterans and first responders navigate trauma, rebuild themselves from the inside out, and redefine their mission. And I'll tell you, I cannot say enough about these ladies. They not only have great tools to help people navigate this whole trauma journey, they are wonderful human beings, and it's an absolute honor to have you on today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. It's good to be here. So we don't really have like a sketched out precise plan of what we're going to present. So I think I'll just tell you a little bit about Jennifer, and then she can share whatever she wants to share about who I am. And then we can kind of go through a little bit of what we've got prepared for you. So Jennifer and I met about a year ago, and she is a force to be reckoned with in terms of she's done work with the military, but the first responder population, police officers, firefighters, she's really, become a member of their tribe and really done a lot of work that's been extremely impactful and meaningful. And so we came together around really a shared mission. And Jennifer has personally showed so much courage in her own life journey, in her own experience, that what we really bring is a combination of Jennifer's wisdom gained from lived experience and just really walking in the trenches of mental warfare, and then helping people through those valleys in her work as a coach and a mental health advocate. So I'm really proud to be here with her as we're launching this. And Jennifer Tracy.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. And for me, I have to go to the story of how we met with Andrew Hollycross. I mean, he bugged both her and myself and said, you guys have to meet. And when we first met, we both took this sigh. We were like one more thing. Okay, why are we talking to each other? Like, all right, I guess we're going to do this. And we started talking. And as we talked, it was like we were saying each other's words. And so your book, Warrior, you sent me a copy. And by the way, Warrior was best-selling in 10 categories recently. So that is quite the feat. So anyway, you sent me your book. And what I felt immediately was that she was speaking my language. She was speaking on a broader level, the pain, the shame, the guilt, the trauma, and ways to navigate out of that. And that, to me, that's when I knew, when Andrew said, the two of you have to meet. And since then, we have really had to journey through our own trials and barriers to be here tonight. And so tonight, just for us, I think that's one of the neatest things. I have so much respect for Doc Springer, and it is an absolute honor to be here. And I can't actually tell you, I'm kind of giddy that like we're together after all of this year, after COVID, after all of just a year of trauma. Like it just means so much. And even seeing you this week too, Sarah, it was just such a breath of fresh air. So yes, welcome.
Okay, let's get started. All right. So One of the things that Jennifer and I really aligned around was that some of the things we were seeing were just very much synced up. And so we want, we're not going to do death by PowerPoint, but we want to take you through some of those core insights, some of many more to come in what we're launching, that will really show you how our insights and our work is positioned to bring a new level of understanding.
Yeah. So
I'll lead off.
yeah. So I can't tell you how many times, not only myself personally, I have gotten in trouble for doing the very thing that people say. And one of those things that we see out there today is this message. It's like a blank statement of, I wish that person had reached out, or I wish they had said this. But what we don't understand is that our first responders, especially, they see what happens on the other side when someone does reach out. In fact, our firefighters and our EMTs are the ones that drop off people when they're on a 72-hour hold. They know what it's like on the inside there. And so for us to say to them, hey, look, if you're struggling, check yourself into that psychiatric unit, and yet they know what happens on the other side there. Can you see how there's this barrier of the very thing we're asking them to do? They know what it's like on the other side there, and there's nowhere for them to go. There's no gap. And that's why we have created what we have. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to come in and say, look, in a safe place, let's evaluate some of these things. Let us guide you in some of these areas so that you can at least be prepared for whatever that next step is, because no one should fear the consequences for seeking help. We both, like, in our core, align. It keeps us up at night that the people who laid down their lives for strangers, that there's nowhere for them to go. And so you'll see as we march forward with what we're doing and already do every day, that this is one message that we are deeply trying to change the narrative.
Yeah, and we think about some of the messaging, and neither of us ever doubts that it's well-intentioned. But if you think about concepts like, it takes courage to ask for help, such a common tagline, designed to help bring people in from the woods. But the problem is that this is not about courage. People who are in first responder roles, who are warriors, they are the bravest among us. They have courage. That is not the calculation they're making. Am I brave enough to seek help? Instead, it's something entirely different. It's, if I seek help, will I lose my livelihood, my reputation? Will I be put on a profile? Will I be flagged? Will I be deemed at risk and not trusted with my firearm? Will I lose the job that my children and my spouse depend on? These are different considerations. So it's not a matter of courage. It's a matter of people, I think, understanding that there are different considerations that those in first responder and warfighter roles have in mind that are preventing them from getting the help. And so one of the driving reasons why we created the Master Guide for Mental Wellness, which we're going to tell you about, is because we wanted to provide to people in a totally confidential, totally safe way, in a way that they could come towards and pace at their own pace, a set of insights from our work that will help clear the fog of war and help them gain new understandings that can help them grow despite trauma.
And I just want to speak to that real quick, because it's kind of like very broad. But one of the things that Shauna has put together inside the Master Guide is an actual way to take a look at having a conversation with your doctor, having a conversation with your therapist. I think you actually said something like, can you overshare on your first visit? So these are the kinds of concepts that we're talking about that we've packaged up in here, right? It's giving you the wisdom to navigate what you're actually facing. So I wanted to kind of clarify that, like, this is not your typical resiliency program. This is real solutions to real problems.
And the next, point to be made is that trauma and also, some forms of treatment take your power away. So a lot of my work has been with warriors and military community, and people come in as well with first responders who are in the role of protectors and defenders. they come into that clinical relationship, and unfortunately, much of the time, the message is from the behavior, from the way the session is handled, I'm the expert and I outrank you. And people that protect and defend life are not interested in that relationship. Mm-hmm. And what it can do in the conventional training that we're given is create a power imbalance where it can take away the power of the person who's seeking help, where they feel one down and they feel like someone is going to give them a diagnosis, label them as broken, and tell them what that treatment plan is going to be to get them better. Mm-hmm. And that is why I think in part 14 of 20 who die by suicide are not engaged in VA healthcare. That's data. And the data that I see, I've just returned from a circle of warfighters in Texas, is that there are so many people that are struggling and suffering in silence who will not seek conventional therapy. That's another reason why Jennifer and I came together around creating something that has real value, that will drive insight and growth in a way that's totally safe and empowers people. And you have some concepts around empowerment as well in terms of your journey.
Yeah. And, for myself personally, some of you guys watching this actually kind of already know this story. And Mike, you know this as well too. But I flew out to Colorado for a funeral recently. And while I was on the airplane, I had a massive trigger and I started sobbing uncontrollably, seriously, with snot rolling down my face and a mask, and there was nowhere for me to go. And I felt powerless. And I had to remind myself the things that I teach when I'm coaching is how do we take our power back in those moments? And so I had to kind of center myself and think about why was it that I felt so uncomfortable? Why, I tell people not to be ashamed, right? I'm triggering, it's not my fault. And I did. I sat there and I thought for a minute. The reason why I felt so uncomfortable was because I didn't want the stewardess to come over and feel like there was something alarming that she needed to take care of. So I was actually thinking of her. And I was thinking of my mask, security, all that kind of stuff. And I was also thinking about how I was okay. I was grieving, but I didn't want her pity. And so after I realized those two things, which was I was kind of thinking of her and that I didn't want her pity, I stood up, I went up to her and I just said, I need to let you know that I am actually okay, even though it appears that I'm not. I'm grieving, I'm heading out to a funeral, and I'm probably going to sit here for an hour or two or cry. And so if you would just give me some space and give me some room to do that, I would really appreciate that. And how she handled it was amazing. She said, thank you so much for telling me that. And it was in that moment that I had this epiphany of how our first responders are not able to do that. They can't show up on a crash scene and have a trigger and have snot running out of their nose and say, it's okay not to be okay in that moment. You can't do that.
Yeah.
And so that's where this dilemma comes, right? And so in my moment, it was okay for me not to be okay.
Yeah.
And I had to take my power back. But that's part of what we're trying to help people see through some of these insights is how do we navigate those two different worlds? Because for them, they can't show up on a theme and not be okay in that moment.
Yeah, it's really nuanced. Some of these messaging campaigns can really sound good, but then when we think about it from the lens of who we serve, the first responders, the firefighters, the warfighters, there are consequences to being that way in certain scenarios. So both Jennifer and I are all about advancing into things that are uncomfortable and creating space for that pain and creating space for that discomfort. But it is complicated and it's nuanced, and you need people that understand those cultures and those individuals and their warrior spirit to really bring that healing. And so that's another thing that really, I think, is going to set us apart from kind of the standard resiliency and messaging campaigns, is that we really understand those things and we go deep on those topics.
Yep. Go for it.
Okay. So another one is the concept of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think a lot of our warfighters, our first responders, EMTs, dispatch, all of those folks really feel like I'm fine. I'm going to keep soldiering on. I'm okay. I'm not really broken. And Jennifer has this concept in her book about the check engine light in a car, and how, if the check engine light came on, you would take your car in to get maintained. But the thing is that many people in these professions, many people who are wired like warriors, protectors, and defenders, have for so long ignored their check engine light that it isn't functioning anymore. They can't tell when they're really struggling because they're so kind of numb to the pain, or they've been told by too many people to just move on or push on.
The calling, or right. Like,
right.
Yeah.
They think part of their calling is to suffer. And you and I don't agree.
Yeah, absolutely don't agree. And one of the questions I ask is like, in a real world, Sarah, if you and I were driving and your check engine light came on, would you feel any fear or shame taking your car in to have it looked at? You wouldn't, right? And again, that's partly what we're trying to provide, is that place, that safe space, right along with what you're doing, Sarah. That safe place to check in on, why are these lights on? How long have they been on? Can I talk about the lights? Where is this coming from? And really providing that space. But along with that, I was someone in the midst of my PTSD at its worst. I was driving around with the car with the check engine lights and the spark plugs hanging off. And in that time, I feel like I let my daughters down the most. And so one of my deepest pain points is that when you feel like you're driving a car with the check engine lights on and you are letting people down, those messages start to seep into you that say you are a burden to them. You are broken. Like, your car is not running. And so one of the things that I really try to talk about is saying, you have to learn how to communicate and advocate and look at your family and say, I'm not broken. I can rebuild. And think of those cars that have been restored. Think of them. When we see those cars that have been restored, we find such beauty in them, right? And so if we can change that narrative, if we can talk to those we love and say, I'm not broken, I can be restored, but will you please hang with me? Will you please remind me of my value? Please remind me that I can be restored. That's what I need from you. Promise me you won't leave while I take this journey. That's what we need to tell those that we love when those lights are on. And I was fortunate enough to have two girls, and I had enough whereabout to look at them and say, I have to take this journey. Will you remind me that you still love me? And I'm lucky enough that both of my girls said, yeah, Mom, we ain't going anywhere. Right? And so that's that narrative. Those are some of those insights that we're bringing to this, because we see how complex it is when you are driving the broken car too.
Yeah.
And so we're not trying to like smooth this over. It's a real problem. We get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And finally, that true resilience includes different things than many people would tell you. We've for many years heard messaging about how, we need to teach resilience, train resilience. What is resilience? Well, it turns out when you pull off the veneer, it ends up being another message that says tough it out, or be stoic, or you're not strong enough. Or people that are congratulated for being resilient, if they're struggling on the inside, and warriors and first responders are professionally good at compartmentalizing their pain. I have heard too many stories of people who lost a brother or sister in arms and didn't see it coming. It was the last person they expected, because that person was so good at compartmentalizing and concealing their hidden pain. That's got to stop. And so we know that we're all resilient until we're not. And that true resilience is not about your individual resilience, but is about the power of tribe, is about learning to turn to those you love and trust, that it's about interdependence. And it's also about facing off against the challenges directly. And it's also about breaking down at times, like Jennifer was saying, sometimes you're on a flight and grief hits you and you have a choice. And you can be resilient in that moment of suffering.
And Sarah, that's one of the things that you and I talked about this week, because I got off that plane and you're one of the first people I saw. And I said to you, hey, look, I've been triggering bad. And so, this is the first time I've met you. And so if I start crying, I need to kind of let you know ahead of time, like, I'm okay. I don't need your pity. Could you give me a little space and then I'll be back in it, right? And so you gave that to me, and that's empowering. Those are the kinds of messages that we are really trying to get out there, is that is resiliency. That's me leaning into you and saying, I know myself. I'm going to reveal this part of myself to you. Will you hang with me and still see me as strong? Those are the messages that we're really trying to change. Yeah, so the Master Guide to Mental Wellness, you guys, just super excited to bring this to you in the way that we have. It is 2 guided journeys. It is a guided journey through Doc Springer's insights. She's got master level insights, like I was talking to you about, just the one, of how to navigate talking with your therapist. Like, that's so powerful in and of itself. And, some self-assessments, all kinds of things, but you can take the guide either way, through my journey or through hers.
And you get both. This is a shared offering. So you can enter through Jennifer's story, through her lived experience, through the wisdom and the insights that she's gained from that journey, from the courage that she showed in facing off against her challenges directly. Jennifer doesn't avoid stuff. We've been through enough challenges this year where I've seen in her that when there's a problem, we address it.
Mm-hmm.
And that has got to be a part of everything that truly lasts, is you have to learn how to face off against challenges, not by yourself, but in connection with people that are worthy of your trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got these 2 journeys that take people through the material in both of our books. And it includes a number of specific elements that will be part of the journeys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The master level exercises are not found anywhere else. Like, that's the part that I'm excited about, is you can't find these insights that we're bringing anywhere else. There's also 22 different worksheets that are downloadable for you to use to take action right away. And each of us have put in at least 10 or 15 inside there. So that's the part that's exciting for me, is seeing how we took some of these insights that we were already teaching and giving you some very sound ways to put them into practice.
So one of the things about the Master Guide is that we really wanted to make it self-paced and really keep people empowered. And so not only do you get to choose which journey you start with, or you can toggle back and forth between them, there's actually a feature in this, which is a crosswalk, where we talk about some of the insights that we found in common and how it shows up in Jennifer's work and how it shows up in my work, and kind of drive reflection that way. But there's also questions that can drive your reflection, either through journaling or talking about them with people that you trust. There's also summaries of key points. We made short videos to pair with each of our chapters. And there's also, like Jennifer said, ways to put this into action, because we know that warriors, first responders, those who serve in police and firefighting occupations, they are people of action. And so we wanted to meet that need with, here's what you do to apply this and really earn this journey of growth for yourself. Because we know that, I will say that a lot of the change that happens for my patients is not because of something that happens in session, but it's the white space between the sessions and what people do with that space that predicts their growth and facilitates growth, or just, stagnation. So how do they find access to it?
Yeah, one other thing I would mention with that, and we kind of hit this in the very beginning with the Master Guide, is this would be perfect to take as a group. And so that's something that I can see really starting to take off, is a tribe of people, a group of people who want to meet and go through the journey together. Because now you've got accountability. Now you've got the ability to talk about the insights, and you've got someone who can say to you, how well did that work for you this week? That kind of thing. So again, you can do it by yourself, but we've also set it up so that someone could do it as a guided journey as a group.
Huge vision of ours is to see people go through it in tribe. and do this in a way that brings them together and facilitates that connection.
And again, Sarah, like I can't speak enough to what you already have in place of how important the things that you are doing, how those pair right along with what we're doing. We need you. We need you to keep doing what you're doing, because those are the kinds of people who may purchase something like this and be going through it, and then they need to check in with your group, or they finally find the courage to share what they're going through, whatever that is. And so this is not a just, Doc Springer, Jennifer. This is like, we are looking to collaborate with other things that pair well, so that we can say, hey, here's another resource. Here's a coach that would be great at this. Here's a therapy, just really, this is a group effort. We've mastered, we've put together our greatest insights.
Yep.
But we're all about really bridging the gap with all of these other people.
And what we're hoping to develop in the future is really a community where, we've created the Master Guide for Mental Wellness as the first offering, but we've got other things on the horizon, things that we're thinking about developing next. We've been talking about forgiveness, for example, as maybe a topic that Jennifer and I will take on and kind of do a deep dive. And with the Master Guide for Mental Wellness, we really had already written our books before we ever met. So there's 2 journeys, but as we go forward, we'll be able to do some really cool stuff where we just kind of like co-create it and then launch some other stuff as part of this community that we're really hoping to build and nurture.
So again, Sarah, thank you for this past year. I mean, you've been integral to me of surviving this year. This has been an incredibly tough year, and in honor of my brother, thank you from the bottom of my heart for loving me and supporting me. And same to you, Doc Springer. It is an absolute honor for me. You guys, as resilient as I am and as strong as I am, it has been 17 years since I've seen Brian and Brittany. And I know how to wrap that up, you guys. I know how to wrap up missing them, and I know when to take that down and to grieve, and I know how to wrap it back up and put it away. But I'm still fresh in the loss of losing my brother, Sergeant Moore. And so I'm right along with everyone else who's in the thick of it, right? This is a new pain for me. And so the things that I'm asking people, which is connect, get back in, evaluate yourself. I'm back in that same place. And so I think that's one of the things, same with you. I've seen you do that this year.
Yeah.
I've seen you, put it in your phone to connect and give yourself a note to, talk to 2 people. I mean, I've seen you put things into practice this year. And so I think that that's the other piece, is like how important it is to practice what we preach.
Yeah, because when you go through stress and trauma and grief, the first thing to go is really being intentional about sometimes lining up to support. And so really having that insight about how do I make this happen when I don't want to really do it? And how do I sort of throw my backpack over the wall and say, I know this works. I don't feel like it, but I'm going to do it anyway. And really moving towards growth and confidently navigating this journey. This is something that Jennifer and I both know about, as far as just fellow humans who are growing, and as far as walking with people in the trenches of their deepest, darkest times. This is something that we bring to the table together, and we're really honored to be your guides for what we are launching. So we don't want to kind of go on and on. So we're going to kind of, unless there's anything else you want to share, just kind of open it up for questions or conversation if anybody has anything.
Well, I just want to say, it chokes me up again to hear both of you share, because again, there's just something so deep that you both nail. You just nail it. It's like it all comes together when you both share in both of your different ways of sharing. It just hits it, and it just it really excites me what veterans and first responders are going to have access to. Like I'm really excited, and I'm very hopeful that in some way we can connect these groups. Even before you mentioned the community, I was already thinking in my mind, okay, how can we do this with the Power of Our Story to get them in community to do
Yeah.
this master guide and to mental wellness. And so I think we're just right on the same page. I'm so excited about your work, and I really appreciate your vulnerability and your sharing and what you bring to this.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to ask any questions or pop in? Oh, Papa Ron.
Ron.
So thank you there, Doc Springer and Jennifer, Tracy, for sharing that. I always talk about stories. Stories, if told right, you see yourself in the story, and you did well to that regard. So I could see myself in your story, and I appreciate that. Some of the things that you talk about, the differential of power, you didn't say it right, that puts an authority over someone's, and how that there's another differential that's at play in, at least in the military. I'm not so certain about first responders, and that is when the boss goes to therapy, it feels like there could be a circling of the wagons differently from when the new recruit goes to therapy. So I'd like you to speak to that. And then another example that came to mind is, like, if we were traveling together and I was drowsy, I pull off and let you drive for a while. No one would see that as a bad thing. That was another example I came up with. The scariest day in my life, and there have been some scary ones, that was the day I was reaching out the first time to make that phone call to set up an appointment for therapy.
Yeah.
And I, the poor operator that was on the line, I said, I need someone who's been in it for a while. I don't want someone who's surprised when they hear my story. And when I share my guts, I don't need pity. I mean, you said pity. I mean, pity.
Yeah.
When I hear someone say, I tell them a little bit of something, they go, oh, I'm done. I want to just bolt. That is like, you poor thing. And I don't want to hear you poor thing.
I know.
I got that. But then, and that was, so I told her exactly the kind of person I needed to be able to have the strength to be able to take this on. And then in the parking lot, getting ready to walk into that first appointment. And I didn't do it at the VA. I didn't do it at the military, because I was scared someone would find out, and how it was. And I walked in, that poor therapist, a very strong person. And I said, before I fill out any paper, before I do anything with you, I got to let you know, if one word of this leaks out, I will sue you out of existence. I said, I am just, I don't want anyone to know. And then over time, I could be the one sharing that. And then the other part about that, you talked about your Jennifer specifically, it really struck home when you talked about you had to tell someone about it, the flight attendant. And being able to do that over time, my personal experience is my symptoms of depression have actually become protective factors, but I have to work at it. It doesn't come easy, and it takes moments and times. And just, I mean, you said in a different situation the same thing. And I've never heard it when I go to therapists. I've never heard them say, your symptoms can protect you. when I know full well that in schizophrenia, those voices are almost always protection and warning voices of something, and symptoms can be protective factors. And now I'm done, and I want you to comment on that. And then I have one other. I know a young, you talk about going to the people to help you that are there to help you, and you reach out with it. I know of a story of an E4 who was going off the rails in the Marine Corps, and his spouse had gone to all of those pre-deployment briefings, and he's coming back. And she heard them say, if things are going sideways, you can reach out to us and we can help. So after 2 or 3 deployments, it was going sideways more and more each time. She finally reached out. It ended up that he escalated more. And because he escalated more, ended up getting admin sepped out. And now for her reaching out for help to the people that said we can help, now she's lost her source of income and her housing, and ends up on welfare within 3 days of leaving the military. And reaching out, and you talk about getting hurt when you reach out for help. All of this you just said brought all of those things back, and in a way that very real. I'm done. You can start talking now. I'm sorry.
So no, those are, very rich observations and based on, real things that happen. And, the good news is I think we have some leadership in the military, that we have people that are walking point on this now. Here's why I say that. First, you're absolutely right that when somebody with high rank goes in, it's a little different than somebody, who's an E1, E2 has been. But I spent the day yesterday with CAC Ramon Colin Lopez, who is the highest ranked enlisted person in the Department of Defense. General Hyten was also there. He's the 4-star vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Both of them, I had conversations with both of them. And, with the CAC, he also has a podcast and has talked with his wife, Janet, who's just an amazing warrior wife, about his journey and about how he has struggled at times with mental health challenges, and been very open about seeking that help, and has made a public commitment to protect those who step forward and seek help in terms of, I want you to be able to feel like you can get the help because we need the best version of you to serve. That's what he said. And with General Hyten, when he was struggling, and he was open about that, which is so unheard of in the years I've spent in this work, to have somebody who is at that level, at that rank, say, they wanted to take me in the back door. They offered to just kind of quietly usher me in. And I said, no, I'm going to go in the front door, and I'm going to, get the help and change this. And so I think not only are both of them leading from the front in terms of what that looks like, but I think both of them would want the same thing for others. And I feel like we can rest in that, and really, we can really count on some support for people of all ranks to get the help that they need and they deserve. So that's been a very hopeful thing. And then, you talked about so much, Ron. You talked about, the differentials in terms of not being able to come in. So what you were looking for, to my ear, was you wanted a doc. You didn't want somebody who would show shock or pity. A doc would sit there and say, you can say anything you want to me, and I won't react with shock or pity. I'm not going to see you as less than. This is a partnership. You're in the driver's seat. Let's go, because I can share some insights with you that will help you see the road and the way to navigate this. But it's up to you, and for me personally, as a doc, this might sound harsh, but like, my perspective is, you can tell me anything you want and I won't work harder than you do. So if you show me that courage and that strength, I'll meet your courage and your strength. But I'm not going to tell you what your treatment plan has got to look like, or I'm not going to, look down on you or give you, some label of being broken, because I don't see warriors or first responders as broken. I just don't. And so one of the things, I had mentioned earlier, but really forgot to go into, is how if you had a tank and you didn't maintain that tank, you wouldn't then say when it started to break down, we all know you've got to maintain stuff, right? You wouldn't say, well, it wasn't well built in the first place. It was really, must not have been a good tank. It was a tank. You just need to maintain it. And so there's many people who never get the maintenance. And what Jennifer and I are trying to accomplish is, in a confidential, safe, protected, self-paced, empowered way, to give people that maintenance so they can continue their performance, optimize it, and rebuild themselves as they move through challenges.
And that's absolutely what I was going to speak to, is, the fear of reaching out for help is so real. And, I come from very lived with that. I'm the one that walked myself into the psychiatric unit. And then when my husband and daughter were killed, that very thing was used against me to tell me that I was an unfit mom. And I had to have a stare down with myself and say, okay, wait, I'm so confused, because I would think that you would say that that was courageous, that I actually had the courage when I knew I was at the end, that I had the courage to go seek help. And now that's being used against me. And so that comes from deep pain within me. And that's why within the content, we teach you how to navigate that you're not alone. But I love what you just said, which is that our whole goal is that you should apply these insights sooner than later. And that's part of the key here. I think that everyone would definitely agree with, is like, don't wait until the check engine light is on to maintain your car. Let's do it when the check oil comes on. Let's do it when we're checking the tire pressure. Let's do it then. And that's definitely part of the message I think we're trying to say, is like, let's not wait all the way till the check engine light is on.
Yeah, there's a crisis.
Let's not wait till then to maintain. Let's do it here.
Okay, thank you for that. I just, people need to know when they go to get help that they're not going to leave worse off than they came in. And we have so many stories of that happening. I mean, I listened to an online where it was a very senior officer was going to the therapist and said, they had conversations. The therapist eventually says, I don't really know why you're here. There's not much going on. And he said, I'm not here for me. I'm here for my troops so that they know it's okay to come here. And it was a weird lesson. It's like, okay, well, you weren't broken and you went to seek help. So sure, it's going to work out. And, for you. And then if I am hurting and in trouble and I go for help, that's a whole different scenario. So I heard something absolutely different than that officer was saying. Like they were just going in as an example to show what it was like to walk in, not going in with any real damage going on, and then walk out just so people knew how to get in and out of the door.
So that's what we would call a verbal eraser.
Exactly.
Like you go in, then you negate the vulnerability that it took you to go in the first place. Like that really destroys the point. And I get so tired of hearing about bad experiences with providers. Now it's complicated, right? Because a good doc can change your life. Like I fully, and Jennifer would agree, therapy with the right person who's worthy of your trust, who understands and gets it, can change your life and set you on a course. But I get so tired of hearing from people, oh, I've never been able to find another doc that really understands me. Or, I get contacted by people I haven't seen in 6 or 8 years through social media, and they're struggling and suffering. And so part of like my heart in this is, I know Jennifer's content. I know that my stuff is based on years of working with warfighters and being part of their circle as a trusted doc. And I know that what we're bringing is going to be worthy of trust in terms of the insights and the things that we're delivering to people. And so I want to offer that not as an alternative to therapy, but as a bridge to therapy, because it's a very different thing to say, I'm going to teach you, and Jennifer is going to teach you what it's like to navigate the journey of therapy knowing how much you can disclose and feel safe, you know, not to over disclose and unzip yourself. And that's okay. And you can set those boundaries with your therapist and go at the pace of trust. You know, things like that we share and really give practical insight and guidance for is going to change the whole thing. So
Yeah,
we
well,
do want people to seek it, but with guidance and support.
Well, my
And
journey has been long. I mean, it's been since 1984. Okay,
Yeah.
so, but it was, but I didn't seek first therapy until 2006 because I was just carrying that along, and it did unpack, and it wasn't easy. But I don't think anyone can accuse my therapist of working harder than me. It's like, because it was a deep dive. So I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying, and I just want to say that that's refreshing to hear, because many times, I mean, I work with veterans all the time, trying to convince them to go to this thing or that thing, or actually just saying, well, what do you want? You want it to get better, you want it to get worse. And, but hearing that there are still some safe places that people
Yeah.
can go and seek some support. Yeah.
And one of the things, like right out of the gate with me, is a concept. It's called Victories on the Hill.
Yeah.
And, you know, what I'm really trying to lay the ground there with that is that there is not just one solution.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes someone really does need to go somewhere for a month or two. And there are tons of coaches out there that do incredible work because someone doesn't necessarily need therapy. They really just need someone to say, and the person can go do it. You know, there's so many different, there's yoga and meditation. I mean, there's just so many various things that are out there today. And it's really allowing that person to discover for themselves what they need. But you've got to have that solid foundation. You know, you got to know when you've got to go see the doc. For myself personally, my primary care physician has been, again, integral for me to be well.
What about others of you, Mike or Janet or
I think
anybody
Janet
else?
Janet's got her hand up.
Oh, yes, she does. I don't know how to do that. Janet, what's on your mind?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm going to follow Papa Ron here. My background's a little different. I'm in Canada and retired emergency police dispatcher with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. My story started in 2002, but in 2003, when everything started to fall apart, I thought it was all relative to a car accident I'd been into, which was the fourth one in 10 years. And so the lawyer sent me to a psychologist who met me in, and you guys are just going to flip on this, met me in a restaurant because her office was being redecorated. Needless to say, I wouldn't give you 2 cents to go to her. So I actively sought my own. And I didn't go, and this relates to you, Ron, I didn't go to our RCMP psychologist. First, I thought it was car accident related, so it had nothing to do with the force. But when I found my own psychologist I could relate to, the first thing she said to me was, this has nothing to do with your car accident. This has everything to do with the cumulative PTSD from your job.
Yeah.
And I was so thankful I hadn't gone to our RCMP psychologist, because I have heard horror stories about them releasing things back. And I fought very hard to get to where I am, years and years of it. And I like what Jennifer said, that it's not always about, yes, do the work, do what you need to do. My psychologist was amazing, got me to that healing point, but then there was nothing to take me past that. I found that when she said, I don't need to work with you anymore, it was like, oh my God, now what? And so I've done lots of training and courses and that since. So I call myself a now what coach, because I needed to find out where my next move was. I needed to know I could do something and that I wasn't broken. And I did go back to my job and I was able to do it. But the thing is we all need to find our purpose. And in other calls we had today, it's like, we need to have that. If we can't find something to move forward for, it's so easy to go back to that dark place.
You
So
nailed it. You absolutely, I mean, part of redefine is purpose. Redefine your mission is courage and grit, purpose and community, and there's two others. So you nailed it. I mean, strategies and solutions. Yep. I mean, it's
Well, I have both your books. I haven't read them yet. So when I'm done, I'm connecting with you guys and we'll have a conversation.
well, thank you for that. And thank you for
Thank you,
sharing.
yeah.
And thank you for all those years of service.
So I can tell you, one comment, and I feel compelled to just mention this. It haunts me, Jennifer, what happened to you when you checked yourself in. Like imagining you checking yourself in because you needed help. And then the consequences of saying that you're an unfit mother or you're, have things taken away as a police officer without help navigating it, or that is really haunting, because that's I'm just I'm still wrapping my mind around that.
Well, and that's one of the deepest pain points that my clients tell me is these police officers and firefighters and EMTs, they know what happens on the other side of those psychiatric units, and there's no way that they're going to go there, and there's nowhere for them to go.
Right.
Because there's a very real consequence for taking that action. And so that's that part of that narrative of like, we have to change this somehow. We can't just say, oh, bring more awareness.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that you'll see us align on. It's like, no, there's quite a bit of awareness. It's like, we have to change some of the way these things are fundamentally handled.
Yeah, unless the message is coming from a trusted person and they can deliver on that trust with an experience that's going to promote growth without negative consequences, it's meaningless.
Yep.
It's and just that, I mean, and that's one more brick of why you should not trust. When that happens to one more person, have the courage, just like you were talking about at the beginning, have the courage to go get help. Then you finally do, because that messaging is making you feel weak. There's that stigma. You go do that. You put yourself out there, you get the help, and then it backfires. And that's one more damaging thing. And so we
need to listen to that. I have heard years of veterans and first responders say, but let me tell you about what happened to my buddy.
Yep.
Or let me tell you what happened to me. We don't listen to that. We keep promoting the same message. And I believe in therapy. I believe it can be game changing with a trusted doc in a trusted space.
Yep.
But if that's not on offer, then we need to stop talking about just go get help with a total tone deaf lack of appreciation for what that means for the people that we're trying to support.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
One more thing. I had 3 docs over the course of the period, and going from one to the next, and I stayed outside the system, and they all treated me with dignity and as though, so it was a different experience than I anticipated. The fear was real, but once I really got engaged in it, there's no way I was probably needed to. I needed to go check myself into a psychiatric hospital, but there was just no way I was going, because you heard, I have stories of people that I know personally, and I watched it happen to them. It's not just some urban legend. It's people I know, and I saw it happen.
No, I've been there. Yep.
I'm having another idea. Before COVID, I took veteran storytellers to graduate school classes just to share their story, because my thinking is, if we can get the future social workers, we can get the next generation, we can get the therapist to really hear these stories from a point of what Jake Edwards calls confident vulnerability. So they're in a place where they can share their story, share what happened, what it was like to go through this trauma and all these stumbling blocks that we're talking about today, to this next generation of healers. so
Mhm.
that they're not talking from their head or from the book, but they are from feeling the experience of a veteran or a first responder. And then I can imagine having you both also having, these talks and Warrior and, both of your books in the curriculum. I
Mhm.
just
Oh,
think it's so
yeah.
important,
Yeah.
We're tracking on that.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
like that's exactly
Yeah.
like we're
Yes.
right there with you,
Yes.
right? I mean, that's where she shines so brightly,
Oh,
is that like her stuff should be, curriculum that's mandated to go through for the social workers and the therapists and things like that. And I don't know what you would call mine as far as it being mandated, because mine is more like, here's how you survive it. Here's what you can teach those, and that's the power together.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that is truly the power of us together.
Yeah. We would love to see this get out to the places where docs are being trained,
Mhm,
future docs, and get in there early.
mhm,
And, to those who are willing to go through a growth process like I did.
mhm.
I'm including myself in this. I didn't show up as somebody who understood all of this. I went through the painful process of looking at how I practice and saying, if I want to be of value to the people I say that I'm serving, I have to change some things. I have to veer off course from where I was trained and what I was told is the right way to practice. No, I'm not going to give you a treatment plan that has these, 4 goals that I created for you. You need to be in the driver's seat, and I need to listen for longer than feels comfortable so that I can understand what your pain is actually about. And I need to see you as an individual. And so there's all of these lessons that I think are in the whole master guide that we love to get out. I mean, I keep getting reviews of the book saying this should be a required reading for all, therapists. And I don't know how to make that happen,
Right.
but it's all there. So would love to, get some help connecting with those opportunities, but
Yeah.
very much we'd like to do that.
Mhm.
I-
Mike,
So that was interesting how you said that maybe the in-unit battle buddy should not be the peer. It should be
Yeah.
somebody who isn't directly dependent on me to perform
yep.
as a peer. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the rank matters,
Mhm.
but it also has to be separated from,
Yeah.
where you live and work.
Yep.
Having been on
Yeah.
submarines, it was kind of the unwritten rule that we had to try and break each other, because if you can't break them, chances are you can depend on them when you need them.
Mhm.
It
Right.
was.
Everybody's like worried about, that piece of things. So we go back to this idea of it's okay to not be okay, or is it, yes, it's okay to go through a time of struggle and pain and grieve and cry, but to be fundamentally not okay for a while, you need a level of safety and
Mhm.
protection
Mhm.
to work on that
Right.
without it affecting the places where you live and work.
just along with that too, real quick. I know, okay, Jenna, I just saw your hand up there. I have found that the more that I try to gather veterans in my own backyard in San Diego, they didn't come, except if they were counselors. The counselors and the instructors came that were veterans, not the veterans themselves, until I got on Zoom for COVID. And then it took off because I think it's that same idea. They're not in their backyard.
Right.
So yeah.
Yep.
I think that what's very important, Doc, what you said is about the control, because all of us in that first responder, military, whatever role we're in, that we are used to being in control. My husband was my boss for a bit and didn't work out too good, but he was still my boss. But he would tell his upper echelon, you hire these people because they can take control, they're type A character, and then you complain when they do take control. And so the thing is, by you saying, we'll work with you, that is so empowering, because again, like you said, if you take their power away, that other psychologist, just like I don't think she heard anything I said.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
she, her mind was back in that office being redecorated. Whereas the second one I had, she took one look at me and she says, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah, this is what's wrong, and we'll do some sessions." She gave me some powerful things for me to do, and then she says, "Okay, now we're going to meet with your husband." And so we worked together, but I didn't know it was wrong. I thought it was all car accident stuff, but I had had lots of health issues. And I think that people need to be aware that when you have health issues, that your body knows before you know, or somebody else does, that there is something wrong.
Yep.
And that's so important, but that control is so important. And
Yeah.
I agree with the peer support, and I like that I can be peer support for somebody totally outside the country. Talk
Mhm.
about working locally.
Right.
Even in the RCMP, I've done all kinds of training. They'll hire somebody from the States to do something, and they won't even look at me to do it. Yet I can
Yeah.
do the same thing. So it's your back door doesn't work, or your backyard.
That's a kind of across the board human thing too. What it triggers in me, even just in Momville, my mama tribe. They may not be like my very close friends, but we, as the moms in the community, we all help each other with our kids, carpool, sports, all that sort of thing. So I remember when I, lost my family member to suicide, that feeling of, how do you talk about this?
Mhm.
And I knew I could raise my kids. And I think this is what triggers me about you, Jennifer. I thank God I never got to a place where I didn't struggle with suicide ideation. So I'm imagining, that big step of struggling, and you're just trying to do right by your kids. I felt the same way. I felt passionate, like this is not going to take me down as a mother and giving my kids a great childhood, right? But I did notice when I put my little toe out there outside of my protective group, the moms, and I think it's just we're in mom mode, just wanted to fix me, and it was so demoralizing. It was demoralizing. Like I can't. It was so unhelpful. So it taught me that, listen, I like you guys, but I'm never gonna be open again. I'm just gonna put on that face, that smile at the sports, and say, "How you doing, Sarah?" "Oh, I'm fine." We
Much
have
better now.
protect, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much better now, right?
Yeah.
Right. What changed? Well, I learned something about how you would respond to me. So I changed my approach in your case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, so I know, kind of your safe area, but it's just,
Yeah.
it's just such a weight. So I again feel like I was very protected because I already had a safe spot. I already had good friends. I could navigate it. So, but it haunts me again when I think about these people who are, Jennifer, or the first responders, or the veterans that are so traumatized, and they're taught not to be open. Where do they go to process this? So yeah, it's just well, that's why I do this too, because I don't want people to be alone. I don't want them to suffer in silence, and that's what they're taught in the military. You suffer in silence, or else you compromise the mission.
Yep.
So you're right, you have to just change the narrative, which you guys are doing beautifully.
And I think paired with what you do, in sort of unrecorded Zoom meetings where people don't live and work with each other, where they can gather, share, and it can go, is very important. That's a very powerful, we've probably all had the experience of being broken down at some point or another, and like a stranger on a plane is that safe person because we know we'll never see them again.
Right.
Right. So in a way, like Jennifer, I'm not anybody's doc. I'm not up for that role. I travel too much, but I do want to scale insights and really support people through something they can access at any time. Videos about this topic, exercises, worksheets, working with the people that you trust, the doc that you have in your your town where you live, or, you know, Jennifer, you know, can do this work in a way that speaks into your heart, but, you know, she could be across the country and you can access her insights anytime, any place. And so that's really what we wanted to create, to really fill that very painful gap for people.
Yep.
I think another dynamic I'm seeing here too, Doc, between you and Jennifer, you're not in a therapeutic relationship or an in practice therapeutic relationship, though it is incredibly therapeutic. You're not in practice right now, and you can have more liberty than if you entered into a treatment session. And so sometimes having, I mean, one of my best buddies is a chief of psychology, and we can just sit and visit, and he's okay with that, you know. But if he was my doc, it's a whole different relationship too.
That's right. There's a whole set of ethics, boundaries. Jennifer's never been my patient. We never entered the relationship. We don't have that relationship at all. We enter this as allies on a common mission, and she brings her part and I bring my part. And you're absolutely right. I mean, sadly, when you have a relationship that's clinical in nature, it is, in a way, it creates a certain set of expectations that are important, but it also really confines the relationship and would prevent me from really doing some of the things I found are most helpful for people.
Yeah, I'm a substance use counselor, and the moment, if I'm in a session with someone and they say a few hot button words, I'm duty bound as a mandated reporter to act on that. And so, but if I have a friend, we're just hanging out, chatting things through, it's a whole different dynamic. And and I have to be cautious that, hey, I'm not entering into a counseling session with you. This is just you and me. And
and we want people to have their therapists and healers in their communities. This isn't a replacement for that. You know, we're not meeting with people one-on-one or doing virtual sessions or live sessions. This is an access it when you want it, develop insights, work through this with a community or a tribe, whether it's peer support specialists, with the healer that you trust, and you choose that. We don't dictate that.
And the idea of tribe, I mean, that can, we've had sessions today about tribe that is very horrible in ways that tribes are combining to get resources or prevent resources from being taken. But this is tribe in a different sense of the word.
Yeah. Anything else before we wrap it up? Michelle. Good. I'm glad you're weighing in. What's on your mind?
Well, I just want to, first of all, I want to thank you very much. I don't know if Sarah shared with you, but I work in the suicide loss community. So I get to work with the families. And, you know, one of the biggest things I hear from the families is, and the police officers were so rude. They were, you know, they didn't even look at us or connect with us. And so I always automatically go on the defense for our police officers. I'm like, well, yeah, they're there to investigate a crime, but do you understand how many suicides they deal with day in and day out? And do you understand that they see the worst of the worst and they have to deal with it? But you gave me something really important that I had never thought about, is they see that other side of what that care looks like. And that, and I tell them, like, they don't go home and process this. I actually had the opportunity. I worked for 2 police officers, and I got to see how both of them process work. One of them would come home and immediately got into just totally watching TV, totally zoning out. The other one would go outside, come in, embrace his family, and then go outside and sit outside for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, just to process his day. And, and I had a great relationship with both of them. And one of them that I knew, he had lost his best friend to suicide and never ever was, we can't talk about it. Oh, sorry. When we, but it gives me this opportunity to talk to families and defend them. But I'm going to tell you, I get to also, I'm out in the community training suicide prevention. I've already have downloaded both of your books, and I will be telling people, I deal with counselors, people that are going to school to be counselors or therapists. I am going to be pushing your books because
Thank you.
I just think, like, when you said, how do we get it in everybody's hand? How do we get it into counselors' hands? I was like, well, if maybe people walked into the office and said, hey, I read this book, maybe the therapist might take it. But I really, truly, I want to thank you guys because, my heart and passion is that I want to help everyone that's ever been affected by a suicide. And I want them to have a safe place that they can process that. And that was part of how I've known Sarah for years, but, I mentioned it to her and she's like, let's get it going. And so, and even if it's doing it through this process, I've already looked at your website and I'm like, all right, this is great information. So, I just want them, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, thank you. Like that. I think that's, again, it's just, that's the collective power that we bring to this. Is like, I battled suicidal ideation. I can speak from a place of what that was like. And then to reach a point of, being on the other side and turning that corner, and then to lose a husband and daughter. And yet I really felt prepared. I felt like, okay, I know I have to take care of myself now.
Right.
And then for that other thing to be used against me, to say, you were unfit. It's like, what? So, you've spent so much time in those trenches. And so that's the wisdom behind this, is those two pairings. And I think for sure her and I have talked about that. It's like, how do we say that in such a way where it's like Jennifer's lived experience, right? Because like, I never want to throw her under that, because she's just not ever been there. And yet she can speak so powerfully to that.
But here's the thing. I think any one of us could be in that place. I just haven't ever yet. So I think that all of us has a perfect storm that could come together in our lives, and it's different for every one of us. So although I haven't been in that place, I don't hold myself as a person set apart that could never struggle with that.
Right.
I just haven't. Maybe if a certain number of horrible things all happened in sequence, I could find myself in that dark valley. And the reason I say that, and this is critical, is because the warriors I serve are the strongest and bravest people in our society. And if they find themselves struggling with suicidal ideation, who am I? What arrogant person would say, oh no, that's not me. I could never have that. That to me never made sense. So just because I haven't doesn't mean that I set myself aside and say I couldn't in any situation. I don't believe that.
Well, and that's why I respect you so much. It truly is. It's because not only are you willing to put yourself in that place of like, just being honest, that's actually the first time I've heard you say that, but like, I just know that about you.
Yeah.
And like, that's what's so impressive.
Thank you.
It's like, that's what you sense about you whenever you read or talk to you, is that you soak in those kinds of things, and then you bring it back out. And like, that was super powerful, of hearing that, like, that you don't put yourself above that the perfect storm, that you could find yourself there, and that lends people to trust you more.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's
You
powerful.
want to come wave to the people? There's somebody from Canada.
That was an aha moment for me too, by the way. That really was. That is, about reminding us that the strongest people on the planet struggle with that. Why? Just because we haven't yet doesn't mean that it couldn't happen.
Right.
And that, because you can start thinking, well, maybe there's a wiring difference for some, not even thinking that it's a judging thing at all. But just maybe, it hit me a different way, or there's a different genetic thing or whatever. Not even intending to judge, but how do we support whatever it is? And, but just to think, you know what, I mean, God forbid, none of us want to go through that, but maybe we have not hit that perfect storm to where we too would also struggle. And yeah, great point.
Yeah, just knowing that it's possible, and if it's your good fortune to never face that perfect storm, to
Right.
not see 180 traumatic situations over your career like most first responders do on average, right? I don't know how I deal with that, right? I know how I deal with the traumas in my life so far, but you can't say that it could never happen. And if you come at it from that frame, then it is a gift of service to be able to support those who are in that valley, and to support them not from a place above, but from a place that walks with them. That's a very important distinction.
I hope it would never come across that way, though, that it's a place of above. Like I would feel terrible.
Never. No, never with you. I'm not talking about you. To be crystal clear here, I'm talking about a lot of people divide the world into patients and providers. And I'm tired of that. You know, we're all patients. A patient means someone who suffers. We're all patients. We're all people that suffer. Suffering is a human universal. And part of the reason there's stigma is because we've made those divisions that are meaningless. I'm fortunate enough that I haven't had enough trauma in my life or the perfect storm of stress to put me in that dark place. But I've certainly walked it with people that are the strongest and bravest people I know. And because they have, I know that it's a human universal. Suffering is a human universal.
I heard a phrase the other day called the weight of the hay. Every camel's back will break when that last straw is placed on and it's too heavy of a load. But there's another divide between those who think that, well, I would never. I mean, and I wouldn't be me, you know, it's those weak, broken, frail people. And that's another divide that exists. And I've heard that. It's like, well, they just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Well, some of us don't have boots, you know. It's like, so occasionally,
I mean, you know, that's an entirely like whole other road we could go down. But, you know, my husband and daughter were killed by a drunk driver. And for 10 years, I served on a DUI task force, and I was commissioned to be there by the governor to remind everyone that behind every number and statistic was a life. And I have a gift of being able to look at every number and statistic, and that would mean those who have offended and those who are victims. And sometimes those offenders were police officers. Sometimes those offenders getting DUIs were firefighters and veterans. And do you know how I know that? Because they gave me their coins on the worst day of their life. But I would give them a gift of forgiveness and say, you are not defined by that. And when I would bring that attitude into this task force, I was silenced because people didn't want Jennifer Tracy to remind everyone about every number and statistic. They only wanted me to be there to represent the victim side, but I saw way too much trauma and suffering on this other side, right? And like, is that not part of the problem too, right? When one of your own is suffering so much from what he sees that he's drinking too much, and then what? Because if it's black and white, right? If it's good and it's bad, then what happens when all of a sudden now you found yourself on that other side of honor?
Victims and perpetrators.
Right. And so, I mean, those are the insights we bring. Yeah. You know, those are the PowerPoints that we bring to this because we both sit in that place. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, that's.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch. Take care. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.